the cognitive tax. In 2013, researchers at Princeton and Harvard published a study that changed how scientists think about financial stress. They found that the cognitive load created by financial hardship, specifically the mental bandwidth consumed by debt and scarcity, can reduce IQ equivalent performance by approximately 13 points. To put that in context, that's comparable to the cognitive impairment from missing an entire night of sleep. The reason is tunneling. When the brain is focused on an urgent problem, especially one with no clear resolution, it dedicates an enormous amount of its processing power to that problem continuously. Not just when you're thinking about it, even when you're trying not to. Which is why people in debt often report difficulty concentrating, forgetting things they normally wouldn't, struggling to think clearly about things that have nothing to do with money. Your brain is already using those resources. It's not that you're less capable. It's that a significant portion of your mental capacity has been quietly redirected to a problem that won't let you stop thinking about it. Avoidance and the ostrich effect. Behavioral economists have a name for it, the ostrich effect. The documented tendency of people in financial difficulty to avoid information about their financial situation, not checking balances, not opening statements, not calculating what's actually owed. And from the outside, this looks irrational. Surely knowing the full picture is better than not knowing, but from the brain's perspective, it makes complete sense. Checking the balance means facing the reality. And the brain, wired to minimize pain, calculates that not looking means not having to feel the full weight of it right now. It's the same mechanism that makes people avoid medical symptoms, delay difficult conversations, not open the letter sitting on the counter. Uncertainty in the short term feels less painful than confirmed bad news. The problem, and it's a significant one, is that avoidance doesn't reduce the debt, it reduces your information about it, which makes the brain's threat response even stronger over time, because now you're dealing with both the debt and the anxiety of not knowing exactly what it is. The cortisol spiral. When your brain registers threat, including financial threat, it triggers the release of cortisol. This is the stress hormone, designed for short bursts, built to sharpen focus, mobilize energy, and prepare the body to respond to a crisis. But with debt, the threat doesn't end. It's there in the morning, it's there at night, it's there on the weekend, and cortisol was never designed for that. Prolonged cortisol elevation disrupts sleep architecture. It impairs memory consolidation. It creates systemic inflammation. It reduces the effectiveness of the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain most responsible for rational decision-making and long-term planning, which creates a particular cruelty. The very brain regions you need most to think your way out of debt are being degraded by the stress of being in it. People in this state make worse financial decisions, not because they're irresponsible, but because their decision-making hardware is operating under constant cortisol interference. The debt is affecting the tool you need to address it. Shame paralysis. Debt carries a social weight that no other kind of hardship quite replicates. We live in a culture that equates financial status with personal worth. And for many people, being in debt doesn't just feel like a practical problem. It feels like evidence of a character failure. The result is shame. Not ordinary embarrassment, but deep, identity-level shame that says, a responsible person wouldn't be here. And shame is one of the most behaviorally paralyzing emotions the brain produces. When something feels like evidence of who you are rather than what happened to you, the instinct is to hide it, not deal with it, not talk about it, not ask for help, hide it. And hiding it keeps it alive. It prevents the conversations that could lead to renegotiation, support, or a clearer plan. It keeps the problem sealed in darkness where the brain can't help but catastrophize it. Shame about debt kills more financial recovery plans than the debt itself. Short-term thinking override. Here is something that looks from the outside like bad judgment. People in debt often make financial decisions that appear to worsen their situation. Spending money on things they don't strictly need. Taking on new purchases instead of paying things down. Choosing options that feel better now over ones that are clearly smarter long-term. And the instinct is to judge this. But the research says something different. When the brain is in survival mode, when resources feel chronically scarce, it shifts its time horizon. Long-term thinking requires mental space, low cortisol, and the felt sense that the future is real and reachable. Under chronic financial stress, the future stops feeling real. Right now is what the nervous system can process. So the brain optimizes for now. A small relief today beats a theoretical better outcome in 6 months when 6 months feels completely out of reach. This isn't laziness. This isn't lack of discipline. This is a brain that learned not to plan ahead because ahead has always been uncertain. Identity disruption. Debt affects more than finances. It affects the story you tell about yourself. For many people, especially those who built their identity around capability, independence, or providing for others, debt creates a rupture in self-concept. I am a person who handles things. I am a person who provides. I am a person who doesn't ask for help. And debt contradicts all of that. The resulting identity disruption is often more distressing than the financial situation itself. It creates a kind of quiet grief, a loss of the person you believed yourself to be. And that grief, unacknowledged, unprocessed, often drives the very behaviors that deepen the financial problem. Spending that temporarily restores a feeling of normalcy. Avoidance that preserves the fiction that things aren't as bad as they are. The brain is trying to protect an identity that the situation is threatening. It would rather maintain the illusion than update the story. Relational strain. Financial stress is one of the leading causes of relationship breakdown. Not because partners inevitably disagree about money, though they often do, but because of everything that financial stress does to a person before they even have a conversation about it. The irritability from cortisol, the cognitive fog that makes communication harder, the shame that makes transparency feel impossible, the short-term thinking that affects shared decisions. You don't have to talk about debt for debt to be present in a relationship. It's there in the tension that comes from nowhere, in the disproportionate reaction to small things, in the closing off that happens when financial realities feel too shameful to share. And the cruel irony is that isolation within a relationship, the loss of true intimacy that comes from carrying secrets, is itself a source of stress, which drives the cortisol, which drives the irritability, which drives the further closing off. Debt doesn't just strain relationships. It creates conditions that prevent relationships from being the source of relief they could be. Relief spending. This is the behavior that looks the most irrational from the outside. The person in significant debt who buys something completely unnecessary, and the judgment is immediate. How could they do that? But the brain under chronic financial stress isn't making a financial decision. It's making an emotional one. Spending, even a small amount, triggers a brief dopamine response, a momentary sense of agency, a feeling of normalcy. For a brain that has been running on cortisol and shame and constrained choices, that dopamine hit is extraordinarily appealing. It's the same mechanism as any other relief-seeking behavior. Overeating, overdrinking, scrolling for hours. The substance is different. The brain chemistry is the same. And understanding this, really understanding it, is what creates the possibility of something different. Because you can't outdiscipline a cortisol-flooded brain, but you can give it other sources of relief, other ways to feel that brief sense of agency and normalcy that don't have a $300 price tag.